So I'm actually going to begin our topic today about developing a lifetime spiritual discipline of stewardship by telling a story about Parker, actually. Parker's middle name, and I know that someone told me there is going to be some other people from other churches watching this. So just as a little bit of context, Parker's my 4-year-old daughter. Her middle name is Glenann, and it's a portmanteau of two extraordinary women, Glenna Kleinkopf and Anne Elizabeth Bishop. They're a married couple, and they were a blessing to everyone who ever met them. They were the people who made sure that every visitor was welcomed, and that they would sit next to the visitor every time to make sure that they knew what they were doing. They lived in this beautiful home that was simple but yet warm, out in the country. They folded my own family into theirs. But also, they were deeply spiritual, especially on the topic of stewardship. They taught me a lot about what stewardship really is. And much of what I'm going to talk about today really comes from their shared wisdom to me. So I'm going to give a little credit where credit is due. I miss them both. One died shortly before Parker's birth, and then the other one died right after. If you ever go to my home, you'll see a photograph of the two of them. Every once in a while, Parker stares at it, and we're like, are you talking to your invisible ghost friends again? But also there's a photograph of Glenna, the one who died last, holding Parker as a newborn infant. Stewardship, they taught me, is not the pledge drive. It's not fundraising. It is not paying the light bills and maintaining the building. It is not making sure that we pay a decent staff or meet a budget. Stewardship is not about keeping the church alive. It's not about paying our fair share of dues. It's not even about passing on a legacy to our children. Stewardship, they taught me, is everything you do with everything you have all of the time. Which sounds like a lot, and it is. Another way to think about this is, if you were to start your day, and I would encourage you to consider doing this as a practice of stewardship by saying, I believe. I believe. Whatever your belief, your faith is. If it's complicated, it's simple. If it's profound, if it's struggling, you start your day off and you say, I believe. And then everything that comes after that is somehow informed by that statement. Now you're starting to think about what stewardship really is. So let me pose a question. What is the single most valuable thing that we're stewards of? And let me clarify real quickly here, guys. I've been using steward a lot. Steward is when you take care of something that has been given to you. I frequently think that I don't own my pets. I'm a steward of my pets. They are their own creatures, but I have been entrusted to care for them. In the book of Genesis, it says that Adam is given not dominion, which is a horrible mistranslation that has led to all sorts of environmental crises, but stewardship of creation. So, what is the most important thing that each of us has been given stewardship over? The gospel of Jesus Christ. Think about how important the gospel is, period. To the world, to yourself, to God's plans. And we have been entrusted with that as a gift. And as such, we then make choices about what we do with it. And I think that as we're pondering this, it is helpful to have a certain sense of perspective. I almost showed a video here as part of this, but I realized the video is 20 minutes long and would carve up my time. So your homework is to, after this, go home, get on the internet if possible, go to YouTube, and I want you to watch a TEDx talk that is done by a photographer of National Geographic. It's amazing. He's a great storyteller, even though he's a photographer. He's a great storyteller. And one of the things he talks about is He thinks that the reason why the National Geographic are these things that everybody keeps, he makes jokes about how if all the National Geographics disappear, half the foundations of houses would collapse. He says the thing that's great about the National Geographic is that it celebrates what's good in the world. It celebrates what's good. And as a photographer, it was his job to capture that. And sometimes that meant that he might look at something and say, wow, this is kind of, But then when he changed his perspective, sometimes literally lying underneath the thing, he would suddenly find something beautiful and amazing. One of those things I think we can capture in perspective is some knowledge about God. And the first of which is that God is love. I think that's critically important. I think it is a tremendous statement of truth. I think it is a transformative fact when we internalize that into our lives. That the nature of the divine being that created each and every single one of us and the world around us is grounded in the sentiment of love is incredibly important. Second is that God is forgiving. And the reality is that while many of us bear the consequences of our actions, we don't bear all of them. And those of us who are sitting here today, I feel like I can say pretty safely, are blessed. Even as you endure hardship, the fact that you can sit here today and be a part of this means that you have received a tremendous gift, one of which we're honest with ourselves, none of us deserve. And third, that God is abundant in that generosity. There is enough in the world. There's a great story that Kurt Vonnegut, the author, tells. He's at a party in New York City. It's one of these kind of cocktail party things, and there's different people that are guests of the host. And one of those people that issued himself was Joseph Heller, who wrote Catch-22. And another person was this investment banker who was clearly a person of tremendous means. And Kurt Vonnegut, being the sort of, kind of caustic guy that he is, sidles up to Joseph Heller and says, how does it feel to know that you, a man who has written one of the great American novels, are never going to earn in your entire life what that guy makes in a month? And Joseph Heller said, I have one thing he does not have. Enough. Understanding that there is enough for everyone. And when you begin to think about God that way, it does help with perspective. I'll give you a personal example. My beloved wife, who just left here a minute ago, doing the Lord's work with Parker, recently had surgery on her right hand. She had a tendon issue and had to have some surgical work done on it. It was a lot more than we thought it was going to be. We thought it was going to be like a little snip and a Band-Aid and we're all set. And instead, it's this long, arduous healing process. It's going to take weeks. And because it is her dominant hand and the all-important thumb, there are a lot of things that my wife cannot do that she loves to do. In fact, the big three: play the flute, skate roller derby, and sew. And we'll do gardening as number 4. All of those are struggles when you only have one functioning hand. There's a lot of things, actually, if you think about it, you can't do with one hand. One of those other things, too, which actually probably is maybe the most important thing for her, is really do all the parenting. You can't lift a 35-pound kid with one hand. You can't wash dishes. You can't change your diaper. All these things that she wants to do as a co-parent. And she found it immensely frustrating. Even with her almost saintly patience, it was sorely tested. And I say that because she's married to me, as this is a fact. And I lamented. I lamented for her because she was miserable. I even, if I'm totally honest, lamented a bit for me because now I'm changing all the diapers. It's not a flattering thought, but it was true. And it really was easy to get down about it. But then I said to myself, wait a minute, I need to think about that perspective thing, because the reality is, actually, there are a lot of things that are wonderful about this situation. One is that we have access to health care, which a lot of people don't. I work a job that allows for her to take as much time as she needs to recover, because there's a certain degree of flexibility and access in my life that allows me to pick up a lot of that load while all this is happening. And not everyone has that kind of job. And finally, the knowledge that this is, in fact, actually temporary and not permanent. And there are plenty of people who struggle through permanent afflictions of the body. And we went and talked about that a bit. And Mandy even commented, she's like, it's so easy to feel and see the negative, and so hard sometimes to remind yourself there's actually so many positives there. It's almost like when you look through a window, you have two options. You can see the pain and all the little fly specks and grime and grease and everything else on there, or you can look through the window and see what is beyond. And that's a choice. And that choice is stewardship. Stewardship of your own perspective on how you view the world. Now, we also talk a lot about stewardship as being about not just money, but also our time and our talent. I used to say that if you ever want to know anything about someone, you need to look at two books, their calendar and their checkbook. Now, unfortunately, no one uses either of those things anymore, so I always sort of say, like, okay, you can learn everything you know about somebody by looking at two apps, their banking app and their calendar app. If you see how people spend their time and spend their money, you will understand a lot about who that person is. And the question becomes, what then, for each of us, in a moment of honest, authentic self-reflection, ask ourselves, what does our calendar, our checkbook say about us? It's a hard question. And probably most of us aren't entirely happy with the answer, which is why stewardship is not just a one-and-done thing, where it's kind of binary, you're a good steward, you're a bad steward. We're all improving stewards, if we wish to be. We start where we are and ask ourselves, how do I want to use all the things that I do, all the things that I have, all the time? And have that question. Because implicit in the theology of stewardship is the belief that you can take some of the things that you have, the hours of your day, your innate gifts that are given to you by God, the resources that you've been blessed to receive, and change the world with it. We're invited to do that as Christians. And that, in some ways, is also a profound statement of faith. Each of us has the capacity to take something that is ours and change the world with it. That's more than just keeping the lights on in a church. Now, I do, even though I said that it's about time and talent, I do want to also talk about money for a second. And I feel like this is actually incredibly important. When I was a kid, it's still the case, my parents never talked about money. They were good Southerners that way. It was like a forbidden topic. They'd rather talk about who they voted for or what their sex experiences were like than talk to me about money. They didn't do either of those things, by the way. Because it seemed personal, private. And as a result, it's too bad because I never got to understand how they were stewards of their money in regards to all the things they thought were important. I knew they did things, but we weren't open about it. And I want to talk openly about money for a second because Jesus talked about money all the time. A shocking amount of time. If you actually go through what Jesus actually talked about, money is part of the story. Think about the parable of the prodigal son. There's money. The parable of the three servants with talents. Money. The Good Samaritan pays the man to take care of the other guy. Money shows up all the time. And Jesus tells us there are only two forces explicitly identified in the world that oppose the will of God: Satan and mammon. Now, let's be really clear here about what mammon is. Some people say money is the root of all evil. That's actually a misquote. The love of money is the root of all evil. Mammon is greed. And what's amazing is that greed, that desire for money, is elevated to the point of being an idolatrous God by Jesus in that statement. Mammon becomes almost anthropomorphized as an evil being. And the reason why that's the case is really simple. It's a distraction. It's a horrible distraction to be constantly asking yourself, how do I get more money? How do I get more money? How do I get more money? When in fact, actually, everything that you own will someday either be sold, given to somebody else, or in a landfill. Every single thing you buy with money will end up being one of those things. It also leads to corruption, because I think we can say this is common wisdom at this point, understand that it is much easier to be wealthy if you have no morals. It just is. There's a great line from The Simpsons, actually. I love The Simpsons. I think there's a lot to learn about religion in The Simpsons. But there's an episode in which Homer has been elected to be the president of the union that is working at the nuclear power plant. And ironically enough, this whole story is about him trying to get better health care for his daughter, which we'll put that aside for a minute. But when he's elected, and everybody's like, yay, and he's like, yeah, okay, I won this. And he's a little anxious about it. And he says, is there any money in it? And one of the guys goes, only for crooked. And Homer goes, woohoo! He's like, I can do that. Money and the pursuit and love of money specifically can lead us to make choices that are not the choices we want to make. And that's why it is such a problem. Which is why Jesus talks a lot about it, and about the role that money has in our lives in comparison to all the other things that are of value and purpose. Which does lead me to the topic of the tithe. My opinion on the tithe has changed a lot, actually. When I was a baby priest, I was indoctrinated into the understanding that the tithe was based in Scripture. And the idea behind the tithe is that you take 10% of everything you have and put that to the Lord's work. And that in the process of doing that, that made the other 9 in its own way holy, because you give 1/10 to God, and the rest of it you get to do with what you want to do, hopefully in an ethical manner. And that's how that works. And so as we're talking to people about how much they contribute of their time, talent, and energy to the work of the Lord, which is more than just the church, that 10% was the goal. I now do not support that notion, and I'll tell you why. It's a regressive tax. And let me explain what I mean by that. Say that you work a minimum wage job in the state of Pennsylvania, which means you make $7.50. Some municipalities have higher minimum wages, but in Pennsylvania, it's $7.50. You work 40 hours a week for 52 weeks out of the year. How much money are you going to earn? $15,080. That's what you make working minimum wage in the United States, 40 hours a week for 52 weeks a year, $15,000 and change. That's without paid holidays or taxes or anything else. If I go to that guy and say, you should give 1/10 to God, they now have $13,500 to live off of, because I've told them that they have to do that. Now, let's look at the other end of the spectrum. Let's say you make $15 million a year. Good for you, by the way. And I say, you should give 10% to God, and so that means that you're going to have to now find a way to live on $13.5 million. Your life is probably not going to be substantially impacted by that fact. So we've put together a system in the church that we're advocating that actually exploits and penalizes and oppresses poor people while really doing nothing to really shake the trees of affluent people. Which, by the way, Jesus actually talks about religious groups exploiting poor people. And you know what he says about it? It's a sin. So let's not have one number for everybody. Let's just ask ourselves the question, what do I need to live? And what can I sacrifice to do God's work in the world? Which is a prayerful individual conversation for each and every person, because we all have different responsibilities. But it's a good question. It calls us to consider what our real needs are, and how much of that is just founded on anxiety and fear of not having enough, or what also we feel called to do in the world to make things different, which is also an incredibly important conversation to have. Because stewardship is sharing in God's mission with a glad, generous, and grateful heart. There's a guy, I've probably told a few stories about him. I know I certainly did back when we were hiring a church sexton. There was this guy named Jimmy. Love Jimmy. I unfortunately don't even know if he's still alive. He was an older guy when I knew him back 25 years ago. Jesus. He was a retired offshore oil rig guy who decided that he would occupy himself by working in a church as the property manager. He was a man of incredible generosity in all sorts of wild and amazing ways. He bought cars at police auctions. He had a whole front yard full of beaters that he would fix up and get running. And then every year at graduation time for high school seniors, he would go to all the high school seniors in the church and he would say, how much money did you get for graduating, like on your presents and whatever else? And the person would say it and he'd say, well, I'll sell you this car for that. Because he felt like every graduating senior needed an automobile when they went off to college. He also tipped waitresses exorbitantly. He and I would go out to eat at the Golden Corral, which is not, by the way, an endorsement in any way, shape, or form. I've received no money to talk about the Golden Corral. But we would go there, and the waitress was always like, hey, Jimmy, over here, my table, over here. And we would always get like 1 million rolls. He's getting like a back rub. I mean, it's a lot because he tipped a great deal because he said, this is my own form of social welfare because people don't tip well at buffets because they're serving themselves and they don't think the waitresses or waiters are doing anything. But the most important thing that he ever taught me was, he said, I always give in church up to the point where I resent it. Because God wants a grateful giver. So I just give this and I say, do I resent this or not? And if the answer is yes, then he stops. But of course, as you might imagine, that number can creep up bit by bit by bit as it goes along. Stewardship is also about transforming lives in our community. It is about being a meaningful, transformative presence in the world around us. Stewardship makes outreach happen. This is the part where I was once taught when I was like, money is the root of all evil. And my mentor said, money actually pays for all of this. Love of money is the root of all evil. Good stewardship can transform communities. It is a prayerful responding to God's call. It's a deeply spiritual matter. This is no longer about the check that you write, put in the plate every month. It's about your understanding of your own life and its relationship to God. And it is something that blesses the giver more than the receiver. Make no mistake, this is not prosperity gospel. If you think I'm up here saying, hey, if you cast your bread on the water, more is going to come back. Well, that's not how that works. That's also exploitive. What it means, though, is that when you develop that spiritual discipline of being someone who thinks intentionally about their lives and what they do with it, it will change you. Now, some of that change might be hard. I heard a story a long time ago from a priest who, there was a woman in his church who was really well off. And he went to her, I can't even imagine having this conversation, but he goes to her and he says, hey, listen, I want you to think about an item that you place a particular great deal of value on and consider giving it away to someone who needs it more. And the woman was stricken because she immediately knew what the item was. It was a diamond-encrusted bracelet. And she knew the person that she should give it to because she had a friend who was poor, had nothing really nice, for whom that would mean so much. But for her, it was just a bracelet. She liked it. She came back to the priest months later and goes, that bracelet has judged me every single day. I can't even wear it. It sits on my dresser and stares at me. Till she finally gave it away. And the other person was overwhelmed by receiving it, and she understood now about the relationship she has with herself and God and stuff. A hard, difficult conversation to have. But think about how much she changed. What became of her in that process? I'm not challenging you that, by the way. You can be grateful for that, but you can think about it, about what that might mean. So, to say, stewardship is in itself grounded in gratitude and thankfulness. It's grounded in mission. It's grounded in a knowledge of God's love for us and abiding presence with us. It is a daily practice that shapes everything we do. And I want you to, I don't want to send you off with ideas. I want to give you some actual logistical, helpful ideas on how to develop this. I mentioned the first one earlier. When you do something, start with a statement of your faith. I believe. You don't have to finish the rest of the sentence. Sometimes it's even best not to. And then say, okay, having said that, now let's do this. Before I go grocery shopping, I believe. Because something may happen in the context of that where you are going to be called to make a choice about what you do with your time, your talent, or your treasure. When you head out to do your work for the day, and whatever your vocation is, start by saying, I believe. And let that, again, start to work its way into your life. Everything you do comes after the statement, I believe, whether or not you actually do it or not, because we all claim to be people of faith. And we aspire to that. The other thing you can do is, at the end of the day, do a little reflection. This is based a bit on the Ignatian model of prayer and reflection. And if you're an Ignatian journaler, that's great. It's a wonderful spiritual tradition. What happens is that you, at the end of the day, you pause for a moment and reflect on the day. And you ask yourself a couple of questions. Number one, what was great today? In my own house, we used to call this high-low buffalo. We would go around the table, and we would say the best part of our day, and the worst part of our day, and the weirdest part of our day. That was the buffalo. So we'd also be like, high-low buffalo, and he would say, this was the greatest part of my day. This was the most challenging part of my day. This was the part of the day that gave me the hardest time. You can add on the weirdest part, because if you are someone like me who really loves a good story and maybe is a little bit of a chaos magnet, you will eventually understand that lots of weird things, in fact, do happen all the time to you that are outstanding and amazing and make your life much more colorful than you ever think it actually is when you trust me. And then ask yourself the last question. Where was God in all that? You may not have recognized God at the moment, at that time, but you may, upon reflection, go, oh, God was in that. God was in that. God might have even been in that, although that is a little weird. Because when you begin to see God in more and more things, you begin to realize how much of a presence God is in your life. A lot of times we go through life just doing. We work for work's sake, we do our patterns, we do care of our responsibilities, we live our lives, we go to bed, we get up and do it all over again. Pausing for a moment and saying, okay, where was God today? Changes your perspective and allows you to think about, again, everything you do, everything you have, all the time. And again, it's a process. It's a long process. There are a lot of great resources about stewardship out there. One of the great blessings that we receive here at Trinity Church is that our diocese has a membership in the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, of which Anne Elizabeth Bishop served on the board. So we don't have to pay for it. Blessing. But it has, if you go on there, there are all sorts of great essays, and there's great recommendations for books, and there's great recommendations for children. All of these things, all of which is we have access to because we're members of it. And I'll tell you right now, when I contacted the diocese and said, are you part of the Episcopal Network for Stewardship? The guy said, you're one of the first priests to ask me that question in a very long time, and yes, we are. And I was grateful because there's a lot of good stuff in there. A lot of stuff to help you think, prayers to pray, articles to read, ways to continue to build upon this spiritual discipline in your life. So I've chatted for a bit here. Allow me some time for questions, reflections, anything. I know I've just done a big data dump. It's a little heavy. Any questions, comments? Yes, ma'am. No, it's actually most of the resources are free online. You just go on the website and do it. It's supported by the donations of of these various dioceses. There are some things that you have to log into in order to get access to. They're not necessarily things that you're going to want to look at, but the church might. Like, for example, every year the Episcopal Network for Stewardship releases a pledge drive program. Where it's a little bit like how Cokesbury releases a vacation Bible school every year. It's a little bit different, like, submarining with Jesus or whatever. Like in the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, they actually have like a campaign. The one last year with the apple tree that you saw, we actually pulled some of that data off of the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. But you can go on there and just log in, and there's a lot there if you get that you don't have to have a login for it. But if you want it, I have it, and I'm welcome to share it with you. Other questions or comments? A lot to think about? Yeah. Like I said, I'm really grateful that the Aunt Elizabeth and Glenna who introduced all this to me and really helped me get a perspective. So go home, spend 20 minutes, watch the TEDx video, get caught up on that, and let's close with yes, Laura. You know what? Okay, hang on here. That's okay, now I'm gonna have to go look this up. The TEDx talk person, yeah, he's the one leading it. It's DeWitt Jones, DeWitt Jones. I forgot to try. He talks about how his parents used to say, DeWitt, turn your light off at night, because he'd read the National Geographic with a flashlight underneath his bed, or underneath his covers. But yeah, it's a great little talk, all about finding what's right in the world. And it's a good thing to remember.
So when you go into the search window, you do TEDx Talk for Rick Jones?
Yeah, or you can do TEDx Talk National Geographic Photographer, and you'll still get it. Even if you forget the name between here and there, just do TEDx National Geographic. And he's a man, he's kind of bald, he's a little short. It'll look very unfamiliar to you, but anyways. But yeah, he actually looks a lot like you. It's really kind of weird. In any case, yeah, and you'll find it. But again, it's a great little bit, and it kind of reminds me about why National Geographic is kind of a treasure in our society that probably goes a little unappreciated these days. As a librarian, we used to have walls of it at the public library. Any other comments or questions?
Just a hypothetical.
Uh-huh.
If there is a person who has just felt the call of the Holy Spirit to be a member of a congregation, and this person comes to you and says, for information, what can I do as a new steward in this community and a relationship with God? What am I called to do, and where do I begin?
Showing up. I mean, some people say to me, like, what does it take to be a member of Trinity Church? Now, the canons say you have to attend at least twice a year and be known to the treasurer, which is to say a giver of record. But in reality, one, just be here with us. We're a community, and you're trying to figure out what part of the body you are. That often is done along with the rest of the body. Second, look for the things that both engage and challenge you, would be my other statement. When I went to seminary, I had a choice of picking 4 gospels, which one I wanted to do my focus on. And some of those gospels I knew and loved. I was like, Luke, let's do Luke. Luke's my favorite. And I was like, that would be an incredible waste of my education. Let's pick my least liked gospel, John. I thought John's such an outlier. It's so weird. It's so circuitous. And I was like, John, like that's the funky one. And I went and studied it, and now I have a deep and abiding love of John because I translated every word of it from the Greek, but also just learned to appreciate it. And so when I say to people, like, get plugged in with something that both feeds you, but also pushes a growing edge. Because we're all called to grow and develop in our faith. So yes, you can do things that are really easy and simple, and that's fantastic, and you'll do great work that way. But also, challenge yourself a little bit. It's how we grow. We push ourselves. And that would be our start. And in terms of giving, I would say, first of all, figure out again what you need and start somewhere. I was overwhelmed by the abundance of this church in responding to the call for Fisherman's Mark. I knew when they came up it was $750. I was like, we got that. We're blessed with those resources. And yeah, we blasted past it. Figure out prayerfully. One of the spiritual gifts that's listed in Scripture is the discernment of spirits. And that's not listening to ghost talk. That's meeting with somebody and saying, you know what, when I talk to you and I see what you're able to do, I see a person who's a great teacher, or I see somebody who loves to serve. Those of you who have done the spiritual gifts inventory, I'm looking forward to having that conversation with you. But we need to be, as a community, helping people discern that very question. To say, hey, as a community, let's help figure out what your call is. I certainly, when I first started, didn't think I was going to become a priest. I never thought that. I was going to write comic books for a living, or be a librarian, or work at a dude ranch. There was a lot of other people telling me that. It kind of got me on the path. So community helps too. I would also suggest to a person who's new to say, talk to somebody who you trust. Because one of the great things about the expression that something is plain as the nose on your face is that we actually really never see our nose, only just a little bit. But mirrors show us our nose all the time. Sometimes you need to have that outside source reflect truth to you in this regard. So one of my bits of advice, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, is to say, talk to someone who knows you best and say, what do you think I should do? Because you see me as the best me, and I'm my own worst critic, so help me out here. I'll have to ponder more of that question as well. It's a great question.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm trying in my mind to, I feel, sense, articulate, there's a chasm between John or Sue or Mary who are walking into a congregation,
Right.
unknown,
Mm-hmm.
but feels a call
Right.
to come and be here, and coming in from your side of that.
Right.
I'm prepared, I'm here for you, you can trust me, but I'm not going to hear John, Sue, and Mary who have walked in and don't know anyone in the congregation.
Right.
And everyone says hi, but how do I surmount that question and that fear of actually making contact and trusting you with my question?
So one, we have to build trust through authenticity and consistency. I think that, when a person comes in new, there always is that anxiety about the unknown. And so I think there's a lot of hospitality to stewardship. There's actually an essay on the website about extreme hospitality being stewardship. That there is something about giving of ourselves to make other people feel welcome. It takes a lot for church to welcome new people. And a lot of churches don't, I don't say a lot of churches, some churches don't want to, intuitively or explicitly. I actually knew a church once where this woman would sabotage every newcomer process because she said, I don't want the church to change. The church can change after I'm dead. I often thought the priest was thinking to themselves, don't look both ways when you cross the street, just for my sake. Kidding. But it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of trust, and it takes some openness. And really, it is too bad when we put so much of that impetus on the visitor. I remember visiting a church that was near my house, and I went 3 times before somebody talked to me. And you know why they talked to me? Because my girlfriend and I stuck around to help clean up after a church event unasked. We just went into the kitchen, started helping wash dishes, and suddenly it's like, oh, hello! That was not best church. We shouldn't have to make people force themselves into our field of view. I think that the other part about how you get people to cross that chasm is by being curious. We've all seen that great Ted Lasso skit or bit with the darts, where he does the Walt Whitman thing that says, be curious, not judgmental. I think that one of the best ways in which we express love to people, if you want my relationship advice, is to say to the person, I am curious about you and I care. When we convey that to someone, whether that's our spouse or a family member or a friend, we're saying a lot right there. If somebody comes in and says, hi, I'm new to this area, I'll say, what brings you here? Tell me your story and listen and be engaged with it, because there's so many good stories out there. And then suddenly when you realize there's a person in front of them who's curious about them and seems to care about them, that really helps bring that together. We're expressing the gospel in that moment. Don't be one of those people, you walk down the street, somebody's like, hey, how's it going? And they keep walking, like, wait for the answer. and be interested in it. A lot of times people come to churches because they're looking for healing. And that'll take some time to get them to talk about what that is they're looking to be healed of. But if you are consistent, curious, caring, trustworthy, authentic, you'll bridge that gap. That's how you do it. Question behind, Pat.
I'm just going to make a comment. I like what you said about stewardship, starting with gratitude, because I think human nature is, it's a lot easier to focus on what we don't have than what we do have. And gratitude is focusing on what you have and grateful for it, and I think that certainly will lead into stewardship.
It leads into a lot of things, but definitely stewardship. And thankfulness is it's one of those things that we're supposed to consistently have as a part of our prayer, is thankfulness. And so pausing for them. It's one of the reasons why, and this is maybe me, I'm not trying to give the church a hard time here, I promise. It is weird that during the prayers of the people, when we talk about supplicational prayers, which we'll be praying for people who are afflicted, and we go, oh, so-and-so, 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 so-and-so. And we say, we give thanks for all the blessings of this life. Silence. Just crickets. And I'm always like, I know we're thankful for things. Maybe we're a little bashful about saying it because it sounds like we're bragging. But it's really okay for you to jump in at that moment and say, you know what, I'm really grateful that I don't have the chicken pox anymore, or whatever it is it might be. I'm grateful that my son graduated from college, or I'm grateful that it's a beautiful day today that I could enjoy, or I'm grateful for whatever. And it's really okay to fill that part out. We actually even include it in the sheet in the back, things that people are thankful for. Every once in a while we get one, a grandchild being born. But it really is part of our prayers, and it's an important part because it helps ground us and put us in the right perspective. Other comments or questions? Okey-doke. Well, thank you for your generosity of time and attention and all the thoughtfulness and prayer you're going to have coming from out of this place. I'm grateful for it, and as always grateful for being here at this time. If you go home and you think to yourself, oh wait, I had a comment or question, number one, I do have open office hours on Thursday mornings. If you're watching online, you're welcome to reach out to me through the church website or whatever. I'm happy to talk about this. And love to continue the conversation as well. Let's close with a word of prayer. The Lord be with you. Gracious and almighty God, we thank you for all the blessings of this life. Your thanks for your care and kindness for us, your continual desire to nurture us and help us grow. The vision that you have of us that is so much more than we could even imagine. Continue to bless us with a thankful and generous heart, mindful of your abundant love, open to the needs in our community around us, and able to understand the abundance of what we have in our lives today. We pray all in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.